Good evening, everybody. I'm Cerise Cole, and welcome to our weekly Fireside Chat. Tonight, we're doing something a little different. We're sitting down with our pastor, Reverend Dr. Selwyn Q. Backus, who on Sunday, October 18th, will be celebrating 15 years as the senior pastor here at the Salem Baptist Church. In addition to his leadership at Salem, he's also celebrating 25 years of pastoral leadership and 35 years of preaching.
You to enjoy. So many blessings waiting for you in store. So hold your head up high, for a new season is nigh. The best season of your life.
All right, Pastor Backus, 15, 25, and 35 years. We are talking some major milestones. First of all, congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So I hope you don't mind if we take a little walk down memory lane.
That's fine.
Okay, so we're going to do that with you because we're so happy to be celebrating 15 years. But let's start when you were little. I'm sure you got called maybe a lot of names. I don't know, but Preacher's Kid, PK, was probably one of them.
That's certainly one of them.
But did you ever think to yourself when you were growing up, maybe I could see myself doing what my daddy's doing and preaching? Did you ever think that as a little boy?
Well, as a young child, no. It was something that was the farthest thing from my imagination. And added to that, it was the last thing I wanted to do. Yeah. So as a young child, it was nothing that crossed my mind, partly because of the fishbowl that you kind of live in as a preacher and as a preacher's kid. Having said that, I really knew around the time I was 15 that the Lord had called me, and I ran from it as long as I possibly could.
How did you know?
There was this real strong feeling. It was just something that overcame me. I was teaching Sunday school and
at 15.
Yeah, at 15,
okay.
And being a part of some ministries in the church, reading my Bible more than the normal 15 or 16-year-old.
That's a good sign.
But there was just this heavy weight, I'll put it that way, that was on me. That at that point I knew I was going in that direction, but I tried to avoid it at all costs.
Speaking of which, when you went to college, you majored in education. You were like, I'm going to be a teacher.
Well, I had my career planned out,
yes.
And there were some others in the school district in Kansas City. They had my career planned out, and none of it included full-time ministry. So, of course, I started preaching my freshman year of college.
Tell us about your first sermon, and how did this happen? Your first sermon, your freshman in college?
Yeah, well, it's kind of interesting because as I said, I ran from the call as much as I could, avoided it as much as I could, and there was a Sunday morning, either the first or second Sunday morning of November. I was just up all night, and my father, of course, had to get up and preach that morning, and so he was resting, but I just couldn't take it any longer, and I knocked on his bedroom door, and he came out kind of wondering what was going on. I said, Daddy, I can't take it no more. And he had always said publicly that he didn't want any of us to go into ministry. And that was one of the reasons why I was resistant. But he said to me that morning, it was probably 3 o'clock in the morning, he said, the Lord calls who he calls. So 3 weeks later, I did what we called at that point, my initial sermon.
Yes.
At my father's church in Kansas City, Kansas, Mount Zion Baptist Church. And it was a packed house. And at the time when you do your initial sermon, you have people that mean much to you kind of walk you into the pulpit. So we walked through the basement and came up through the back of the church into the sanctuary, and people were lined up around the wall. Exactly.
Whoa.
And so,
standing room only.
Standing room only. So you can imagine not only Mount Zion, but a lot of other preachers and pastors who were friends with my father, my high school classmates.
Oh, yeah. Oh, wow.
Yeah, people I had grown up with in the church community and the community overall. And so it was standing room only. And when I saw that many people, of course, you know, numerous things go through your mind, but it was too late then.
Do you still remember the sermon, the title, the...
I sure do.
Okay.
I'm so glad I found Jesus. John chapter 4, the Samaritan woman at the well. That was the first sermon that I preached.
Wow.
Yeah. I preached that text. It's one of my favorite texts. I preached it over these past 35 years dozens of times, but that was my first sermon.
And so after that sermon, you didn't turn it off. You kept preaching.
I kept preaching. I would preach in small churches, small and large churches across Kansas City, not because I could preach, but because I was my father's son.
Membership has its privileges.
It has its privileges.
Yes.
And so a lot of pastors gave me the opportunity to preach. Of course, I did at the time, a lot of youth revivals and youth days and things of that nature. So I was granted a lot of opportunities. And again, more than then, I know now, it was really because my father made inroads for me.
Yeah, so nice.
Yeah.
So then you went to seminary soon after that.
Yeah, I finished up at my first year at Ottawa University in Ottawa, Kansas. I went for one brief semester to Bishop College, which was in Dallas, Texas. It's a historically black college and university.
All right.
And then I finished my teaching degree at Emporia State University, Emporia, Kansas.
And we should say you did teach.
Yes, I taught for 2 years.
4 years. What kind of teacher were you? I can see you in the classroom.
Yeah, and I was an elementary ed teacher.
Okay.
So I taught 5th grade and 3rd grade. And so it was somewhat of a challenge. But I was kind of the school disciplinarian.
Okay.
They would, I was the only male teacher in the school. So when there needed to be discipline, they would bring the kids to me. I guess I was the big guy in the building. So, but taught 2 years, had a good time. And again, that was the road I had planned, was to get a master's in education, a doctor's in education, and be a principal or administrator. But I heard a preacher, Miles Jerome Jones, who was pastoring in Richmond, Virginia, and a professor at the School of Theology at Virginia Union University there in Richmond. And he came to preach for my dad, and about a week later I told my dad, wherever he's teaching, that's where I need to go.
Wow,
Yeah.
that he moved you that much.
Yes.
And so you did.
I did. It was in 1992
Okay.
that Sister Backus and I moved to Richmond. We had been married 6 months, and so we took the little that we had and moved to Richmond and started school in August or September actually of 1992, and finished in. It was a run of events really. At the end of seminary, I finished seminary in May.
Okay.
We found out Selwyn was on the way in
Hello.
May. Right, exactly. And I was called to my first church in June of 1995. So it went just like that.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you were called to your first church. And where was this?
First Union Baptist Church in Richmond, Virginia.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how long did you stay there?
I was there 5.5 years.
And what was that like this is your own church. What was that like?
Well, it was really interesting. I always admit I learned a lot that I didn't know I was learning by watching my father. And so I had that advantage over a lot of people who are going into their first time pastoring. And so I had watched him and observed him, and again, didn't know I was being trained and groomed. But as well, I had him as a reference point, but also someone I could call when I needed some guidance and some wisdom. So I am so grateful that the Lord allowed me to have that deep well of wisdom and his experiences to help me out. But to be truthful, I was a novice. I had no idea what I was doing. But the Lord kept me and
Yes,
protected
he did.
me.
Yes, he did.
So he allowed me to learn week by week and month by month, and those lessons have served me well.
And from there you went to Ohio.
Yes, to the Shiloh Baptist Church in Dayton, Ohio. I went there in 2000 and 2001 and served there for 4 years. Wonderful church, wonderful people. Was really settled into both of my prior churches and thought that was going to be, the long haul. but the Lord had a different path for me. And a lot of the lessons I learned at First Union in Richmond, I was able to implement at Shiloh and Dayton. And additionally, a lot of the mistakes I made, I was able to avoid them in Dayton because I had been through them. But the people of First Union and Shiloh were very gracious. I still have relationships with many of them. Just received a birthday card from one of the members, a couple of birthday cards from members from Richmond and in Ohio. And so one of the things I'm glad about is I can look back and say that when I left those churches, I left on good terms.
That's wonderful.
And I can still have a relationship with those people.
Yes. Well, when you left Dayton, you were called to come to Salem Baptist Church. What did you even know about Salem?
Well, it's interesting. This is really interesting.
Okay.
My father used to come preach for J.C. Wade Sr.
Oh, wow.
And we used to take church trips here when they were down the street on 33rd, 34th and Lake. And so I was familiar with the church to that degree. And Dr. Wade would come preach for my father. His daughter, Doretha Wade, would come and do workshops with the choir at Mount Zion. So I was familiar in that sense. But as well, Dr. Maurice Watson had preached for my father during the time I was struggling with my call to ministry. And he was a young man, you know, and so to see him kind of helped me in my spirit to say, well, it can be done.
Yes, it can.
And then we preached, my father preached for him at St. Mark in Little Rock, and so I was acquainted with him again. And interestingly enough, a couple of years before he left here, he had come to preach for me at Shiloh and Dayton. And so I was aware of the ministry of Salem and the pastoral leadership with J.C. Wade Sr. and with Dr. Watson. So it's really interesting that things have, to some degree, come full circle.
It was meant to be. It seems like, doesn't it?
Yes, it was a divine order.
Divine order. You had a young family then. What did they think about coming to Nebraska?
Well, it's interesting because one of the things I said to them, and the boys were very young, is that one, we would be much closer to my parents, and then two, that in Dayton, for them to go to Sonic, they had to drive 30 minutes.
You don't have to do that in Nebraska.
I told them, exactly.
You don't have to do that.
I told them, I said, Sonic is right around the corner. One of the other things that helped the transition was Sister Backus tricked me, saying that it would help the transition if we bought the boys a dog. Aww. And so I was tricked into buying a dog to make sure that they would be okay, with this transition. But I must say that Salem, over the past 15 years, has been very warm to my children and to my family, and for that I'm grateful. And so it made the transition that much easier.
This is probably a hard question, but it's been 15 years. How would you describe your time here? I know that's hard because it's been 15 years. So
yeah, it has been at times trying, but most importantly, it's been stretching. There are times I probably could have cruised in ministry, but coming to Salem has made me stretch my faith, my preaching, my scholarship, my pastoral skills, and all of that. And so it has stretched me, and it's allowed me to lean on the Lord more than at any other time in ministry. I wrote a book a couple of years ago called Shoulders and Shadows, Following Legendary Leaders. And in it I talk about each leader, each pastor, senior pastor that I followed, and each of the experiences were different. And so coming to Salem caused me to be stretched because of the pastoral leadership before me, Dr. Watson and Dr. Wade. And so I've never tried to fill their shoes. I just try to wear my shoes as best I can.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's good. That's good. Are there any highlights? Anything that stands out to you in the past 15 years? Things you're most proud of?
Well, there are a few. One was being able to preach, and I'd done that previously, but to preach on the national level in our denomination. It was a great opportunity to be on the stage with my father, who was a national officer, and with the officers of the National Convention. So that was a great honor. One of the other things that many people forgot is that Barack Obama, when he was a senator,
Yes.
sat right here.
Yes.
And so that was a highlight. I could see it in him then that he was on his way. So that's been a highlight. I think the biggest highlight of the past 15 years is the successful capital campaign that we took part in from 2014 to 2017. And we were able to successfully pay off our mortgage. And that was, yes, it was a high mark in ministry. And it didn't have as much to do with my leadership as it did the faithfulness and the stewardship of Salem. Generally it's difficult to pay off a mortgage. People are motivated more by bricks and mortar, so we're going to give because we're building something.
True.
But Salem was faithful. They were committed, dedicated, and sacrificial. And so I would say over 15 years, that is clearly the highlight of my time here at Salem.
That is a major milestone. As we celebrate your 15th anniversary, we're in the middle of a global pandemic. It's changed so much for all of us, but as a pastor, how has it changed your job and how you minister?
Oh,
I know.
numerous ways. The most evident one is getting used to preaching to an empty sanctuary.
Yeah.
And that's quite an adjustment. But one of the things early on, I asked the Lord to give me what I needed to be authentic and to continue to preach as if the crowd was here. So that's been the biggest transition. But the flip side is, 2020 is our year of reaching. That's our theme for the year.
Look at that.
But we've been reaching in untraditional ways. Our online presence, our streaming presence. We're broadcasting our worship every week on one of the local news stations. And so we've reached hundreds, and I would literally say thousands of people that would have never been introduced to the church. And so the adjustment has been difficult. It's been interesting, but there have been some blessings that come out of it. Part of the other part that has changed is, even with pastoral care, going to hospitals and things of that nature, that has changed dramatically. And down to, things as weddings and funerals. All of that has changed. And so the landscape has changed. And I'm hoping that things turn around quickly so that we can get back to our new normal.
We are all looking forward to that. All looking forward to that. Well, over the 15 years, we know your family has been with you all along the way. What message do you have for First Lady and your two sons?
Well, I'm grateful for their commitment and their dedication and their understanding. Because, when you're a pastor's wife or a pastor's kid, you share your husband and your dad with the entire congregation. And Salem's a fairly large congregation, and so I am grateful that they made that sacrifice. And I'm grateful to Salem on the other end, in that Salem has treated them with such kindness and warmness that they still love the church. And
that says a lot.
It does. I know PKs, pastor's kids and preacher's kids, who find it very difficult to come to church or to be a part of churches because of the difficulty the families have faced in pastoral leadership. But Salem has been gracious and kind to my family in a manner, as I said, they still love the church and they still love the Lord's people.
Speaking of your sons, it's been wonderful watching them grow. One's an undergraduate, one's in graduate. Do you feel like one of them could follow in your footsteps? What do you think? What do you think?
Let me tell you what I pray first.
Okay.
I pray that neither of them do it.
Okay. Like your dad prayed for that.
Right,
for you.
exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. But I have an inkling that one of them at least is going to go into some sort of
Into
ministry.
some sort of ministry.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah.
Well, Pastor Backus, you have been committed to faith and family and also football. My last question, are you still sticking with those Cowboys? Are you still going to do it?
Well, listen, I am unfortunately a diehard.
Okay.
I'm still sticking with them.
All right. Chiefs Kingdom awaits if you ever want to.
Well, the Chiefs are my second team.
Yeah, okay.
But you have to understand, when I was growing up watching football, the Chiefs were not very good. And
That
so
is true.
I picked somebody who was winning at the time. But I'm still a Cowboy fan, and it's going to be it's already been a long season. But I'm going to stick with them, and hopefully we can figure out that it's better to score 30 points and keep somebody else from scoring 40. That's our problem right now. That's our biggest problem. So, but I'm hanging in there with them.
Well, Pastor Backus, we are so thankful for you. We want to congratulate you. 15 years here at the Salem Baptist Church. Salem is going to celebrate this. We're excited to celebrate on Sunday, October 18th. Until then, Pastor Backus, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody. Have a good night.